name is Karina Lourdes, Hernández, Flores, and these are my classmates, José, Eduardo, González, López, and Rodolfo, Maza, Murillo. And we are languages students at the UJAT. And in this video, we're going to talk about the first and second language acquisition theories according to the book How Languages Are Learned. We're going to discuss some main questions and other general questions in order to clarify the subject. We know that language acquisition begins in the early childhood, and we need this background because both second language research and second language teaching is influenced by the understanding of how children acquire their first language. Okay, so the first question is, why does language acquisition occur in different stages?
Okay, as we know, communication is something very important to human development, and it's important to the babies too. Sometimes we ask to ourselves what enables to a child to start to communicate with another persons or with another babies. And this is because the necessities that babies have in life as older people. The communications in baby starts with some stages. One of the first stages is when they are in the womb. They start to recognize the difference between some phonemes, and they start to recognize too the difference between the mother's voice and the father's voice, and when another people is talking.
In the next stage, children start to combine words and into simple sentences, and then they start structured question to negation, and by the age of 4, children acquire the metalinguistic awareness.
Yes, and we know that metalinguistic awareness is when they start to use the language, they start to separate the meaning of the language that conveys, and they start like using the language like an abstract object. They give it some another meaning or another sense to the words.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting how babies start communicating their necessities through paralinguistic elements, and then they proceed to make the sentences and combine the words. It's very fascinating.
Yes, it's because of a necessity of communication.
Yes. Next question is, what do you think about the behaviorist perspective for the language acquisition?
Behaviorism theory was influential in 1940 and 1950 by B.F. Skinner, that is the best known about this language. This theory, he proposed that children acquire language by imitate and practice. By their environment, children would continue imitate and practice these sounds or patterns until they form or acquire habits of correct language use.
And feedback too, feedback is something important in behaviorism. The positive reinforcement that the person gives to a child, for example, when they say something that is wrong, his father can say, no, this is not okay, you can say this. And this reinforcement could help to the child acquire correct language.
You mentioned something about habits, and we know that we create habits in order to acquire the language, at least for behaviorist perspective. And for second language acquisition occurs something similar. And other question is, do you think that habits that have been learned when acquiring the first language interfere with the habits that are created when acquiring a second language?
Well, it's very similar, but it's not the same.
I think it's not like habits, I think it's more like patterns. And in the book it says a very, very important thing that habits has nothing to do. It's more like patterns. And this part says that most of the errors that learners make are not predictable in the basis of the first language. It means that habits not affect the second language acquisition. It's more like patterns, and the patterns not affect too. In fact, the patterns could be helpful, and in other cases not. I remember when in our class the teacher says that we used to, for example, we are learning English, and we used to do very specific translations that came from Spanish. For example, I'm actually working instead from I'm currently working, because we translate from Spanish, very specific from Spanish. And this is something that could be wrong in some cases, but in some cases could be helpful. For example, when we start to see similarities between the language that we are learning and our first language. I remember something very common and something very specific when I was studying German, and it was like the possessive pronouns are very similar to English. For example, we add just an S after the noun, and it is the possessive. So I was very happy because I understand this very quickly. And the conjugation of the verbs are very similar to Spanish. So I think could be helpful. The parents could be helpful in some cases because you start to see similarities and you start to learn more fast the language you are learning.
Yeah, and we know that learn a second language, you can say it's a little bit difficult because your brain it doesn't have a blank space because you already have a language. And the behaviorist perspective, I think it tries to imitate the way we acquired our first language. So in this case, for second language acquisition, we have the help of teacher and
Other lingual elements, for
Yes.
example.
And also in the second language acquisition, behaviorists propose that students need to learn by heart and create habits using mimicry, memorization, and dialogues.
yeah,
Yes, it's
They-
very important.
yeah, they need to memorize sentences by heart in order to recreate them. Okay, the next question is based on other of the most important language acquisition theories, that is innatism by Chomsky. So why does Chomsky state in his theory?
Well, Chomsky said that children are biologically programmed for learn a language. In that language is developed in the same way that our biological function is developed. Just like a child learns to walk, and first he makes mistakes, and it's the same thing in a language. First, maybe the child pronounce the word incorrectly, but then they start to polish the language skills with universal grammar.
Yeah. Yeah, and universal grammar is something that we suppose have in all the languages, and it's something that language have in common, right?
Right. This is in first language that you said. It's very important in first language. But Chomsky said that universal grammar can allow the children to acquire the language that is in the environment, but only during a critical period. But then some people are not think that this is a good framework to understand the first language acquisition, but not the second acquisition, because what's happened with the adults that have already passed the critical period, that is very important. But one psychology, I don't know what is he or she, says Vivian Cook in 2003 says that there is a logical thing that can be explained for the person that are learning a second language, and that is that they know more than the language that they are learning that they should know. For example, a person who is learning English but is exposed just to simple samples of language or inputs, no grammar, no rules, and they notice about things that they shouldn't know. And by this, Vivian Cook says that universal grammar is available on the second language acquisition for the adults, but is not the same way because they already acquire a first language. But we have the availability of the universal grammar in first and second language.
And also we have the monitor model by Krashen that is based on Chomsky innatist perspective, right? What can you tell me about this hypothesis?
Okay, these five hypotheses are the best known model to acquire the second language. Krashen says that there is a huge difference between acquisition and learning. Acquisition is when we are exposed to samples of language or inputs of language. We just acquire language because we are hearing the language. We are not learning. Learning is something different, and it happens when you put attention to the grammar, when you study the language, when you are learning conjugations, pronunciation, phonetics, and all the things. This is the difference between acquisition and learning a language. The next one is the monitor model. The monitor model says that we have the opportunity to polish our language skills when we enable a conversation. For example, if you're a native English speaker and I'm just a beginner and I know something about English, but I enable conversation with you, and I start to polish my skills because I hear your pronunciation, your grammatic, your way to speak, and I'm going to polish my language by experience, right? The third hypothesis is about the natural order. Could you please, Karina, explain us what is it about?
Yes. The natural order hypothesis was based on the finding that, as in first language acquisition, second language acquisition unfolds in predictable sequences. That is, that the rules that are the easiest to state and thus to learn are not necessarily the first to be acquired. And what about the comprehensible input?
Well, the comprehensible input is that acquisition occurs when one is explained to a language that is comprehensible. For example, I'm an English student and my teacher gives me the vocabulary necessary, the pronunciation, the grammatical rules, and this is represented by a formula. That is I plus 1, where I is my level of language that I have, and 1 is the vocabulary, the pronunciation of words, and all of teach me another language. And then we have affective filter. It's a metaphorical barrier that doesn't allow us learn another language. So the input is comprehensible, but we cannot processing that information because we are bored or we are tense.
We are anxious, right?
Yes.
Yes. I think that's very interesting because why does this affect us? Yeah, right?
Yes.
And it's pretty interesting and how even these factors can affect us and doesn't allow us to acquire new language, right?
Yes.
That's why it's very important to be quiet and be relaxed when we are learning another language, because if we are not, we can filter the information that is given for a teacher.
And now we are going to talk about another perspective for language acquisition, which is the interactionist perspective. Why is interaction so important to acquire a first or a second language?
Well, Piaget said that children acquire language connecting the physical world with a concept. So it's important. But this theory doesn't explain a context more abstract. For example, the next week that doesn't have a physical concept. So later, Vygotsky said that the principal reason for learning a language is the social interaction, and he observed that and how children talk or speak with other children, and how children speak with adults. So, and he observed that the vocabulary is very different between children, and children adults.
Yeah, so basically, Piaget said that language is acquired through interaction with the physical world. Meanwhile, Vygotsky said that it's the social interaction with
Yes.
other children or adults, right? And in second language acquisition, interaction is also the base for language acquisition, right? That is, for example, when a native speaker talks to a learner and he has to modify their speech in order to the learner to understand him. This modified speech is a necessary mechanism to make the input comprehensible. So the native speaker has to make comprehension checks, and the learner needs to make clarification requests and self-repetition.
Yes, I agree with you. I think these two theories are very important to explain first language acquisition and second language acquisition. Those theories are interactionist theories. as well as noticing hypothesis. That is a very important hypothesis, and this theory argues that nothing is learned unless it has been noticed. There is an example in the book that says that a person who was learning Portuguese and was studying Portuguese but in Brazil doesn't understand many things about the language, and he was very confused about some things unless by the environment and the communication with another people he started to notice what was the meaning of the word, and then he started to using the word that he started to learn. This theory is all about what environment gives you. For example, if you're in an environment, you start to discover new words and you start to acquire these words and use the word in your vocabulary. It is very important to the people to interaction with the environment, and notice hypothesis is all about interaction and release what is a word and what is the meaning of a word by the context.
It's basically awareness, right?
I think it's awareness, and you start to notice and you start to interact with the persons.
I agree. And what about the input processing hypothesis?
Input processing by Bill Van Putten, and it's about, well, he observed many cases that a student misinterpreting the structure of the sentences. For example, when English speaker hear sentences in Spanish, usually they form the sentences by the form that they know.
Yeah, in their native language, right?
Native language.
It's like they write in what they already know. They follow the patterns of the English.
Yes, it's correct. And then he say that the problem is because learners cannot pay attention in the meaning and in the form of
At the same time.
And about processability theory, Manger Friedman theory of learning developing the ability to process linguistic elements in very different sentences positions.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, but I want to know, what about the role of practice in second language acquisition?
We know that the practice is very important for acquire a first and a second language. It's very, very important, and a very specific part of the book says that we put attention on what we want to learn, and practice is very important to improve our listening skills, our speech skills, our pronunciation, and all those things. And by practice, we can convert our declarative knowledge to procedural knowledge and then to automatic knowledge, and that is something that we are going to see in cognitivism.
And now we are going to talk about of the most important perspective for me, which is the cognitive perspective that clarifies the understanding of second language acquisition. And can you tell me, please, what are some of the theories that are proposed in this perspective?
Well, I'm going to talk about information processing. This theory sees second language acquisition as a build of information, build of knowledge that we acquire while we are learning the language. It means when we are beginners, when we are start to study the language, we don't know much about the language. So when a person gives information in another language, we start to put attention on what the people is talking about. And when I'm going to talk with you, I'm going to put attention first in what I'm going to say, because I have to translate, because I don't in touch with the language. And when I say that the person put attention, it means that we put attention in our cognitive resources for process information.
We focus on that.
We focus on that and processing what we are going to say. In other words, it is more like translate before to talk, and translate when somebody is giving us information, because we are beginner, we don't know a lot about the language. And then this is like declarative knowledge. We don't know a lot about the language because we're a beginner, but then this declarative knowledge turns out procedural knowledge. Procedural knowledge is more like an advanced kind of knowledge that we acquire in the language. Then this procedural knowledge turns out automatic knowledge is when we are pro in the language. We know a lot about grammar, we know a lot about pronunciation, vocabulary, because we have a lot of time studying language.
Just like its name, it's automatically.
Yes, automatic.
Yeah, and you don't put attention in what you are saying, but in the meaning. And now, what about usage-based learning?
Well, usage-based learning is about a state that the language learning will develop based on the use of it and the environment in the frequency that we practice. For example, our French teacher gives us too much vocabulary, and if we don't practice the vocabulary, we won't learn. But if we practice the vocabulary, we will learn, and we are going to talk naturally because
It will become natural. Yeah, it's important the use of the language, the new language we are acquiring. The second language is very important for us to speak it naturally, right? And now the competition model. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the competition model was argued by two persons, Elizabeth Bates and Brian McWiley, I think. And this theory states that it explains both the first and second language acquisition. So it states that this theory takes into account not only the language form, but the language use. A person who is learning English, for example, start to figure it out through exposition. The person can start to figure it out how to use cues. You know, for example, in the English grammar, there are some rules. For example, first is the subject, then is the verb, and there is the object. When someone uses this structure, the person starts to use the cues to figure out what is the meaning of a word that they don't know.
In this video, we analyze some of the most important theories for first and second language acquisition and the differences and similarities between them, and how they are so important, for example, for us, language students, to improve our language skills.
It is very important for us to have a good comprehension, a good knowledge of every theory and how first and second language works. Because in the future, it can be helpful for us if we want to become a teacher, if we want to study another language. So it's very relevant for us to understand and have a good idea about how first and second language works correctly.
Well, as we know, there are many differences and similarities between first and second language acquisition. For example, behaviorism in first language acquisition explains very well, but not in second language acquisition. So we need to know how work every theory to understand how languages are learned.
Exactly, it's very important that you said.
And in the end, what all theories of language acquisition are intended to account for is the ability to human learners to acquire language within a variety of social and instructional environments. We hope you liked the video, and this was our discussion. Thank you.